Well, Father, something else we wanted to discuss on the program tonight was Father Ripperger and his book of Deliverance prayers. That over the years we've received multiple emails on this subject, and some of the prayers that he has in there, and just some of the general ideas of these deliverance prayers, and just the little bit of information we've researched in regards to this. We in this book, the Deliverance prayers. I guess the premise for it is Father Ripperger himself says that priests today, he says, any seminary in the world, they do not learn about spiritual warfare. They do not learn how to combat the devil. They do not learn about exorcisms and how to fight the devil. And so the premise of this book is a guide essentially to help the laity in the spiritual warfare and their battles against the devil. And so that's the premise of these deliverance prayers. And reading through some of the prayers in this little booklet, which is very popular. Again, many of our viewers have referenced this. We find prayers, things like a perimeter protection prayer and prayers against generational spirits and various things like that. So I wanted to ask your opinion on these deliverance prayers, Father, if you were familiar with at all with any of these, and what your thought was on this, on the laity praying these deliverance prayers and their spiritual warfare.
When I first heard of these, I without knowing Father Ripperger's name, I thought, well, it sounds like a Protestant approach, like a Protestant substitute for exorcism or something of the kind. I mean, can there be prayers of deliverance? Well, of course, we pray, deliver us from evil, right, in the Our Father. So there's nothing wrong with the idea of being delivered from evil, obviously. But still, you know, in the church, we have exorcisms, and I guess Father Ripperger is concerned that non-exorcists not perform exorcisms, right? I understand that too. Because it is dangerous. The whole idea of having like prayers to protect the periphery, and prayers to like overcome generational spirits, or prayers to reverse decisions and things like that. Again, the whole idea sounded rather, well, not just Novosoro, but actually kind of Protestant-y. As I recall mentioning that some prayer, at least, it's a Protestant prayer, right, that was taken over, and Father Ripperger says he Catholicized it, I guess. Which again sounds rather peculiar. I mean, I can see people applying those, and you know, I'm not sure if they're what the result is supposed to be, if they're supposed to see an improvement in the situation, or the evil is ameliorated, or whatever. I really don't know. I guess I'd have to check that out and read the forward to the book, which I haven't done. But I just found it rather peculiar. In fact, I found it so peculiar because someone just sent us a video clip of an interview with Father Ripperger, in which he actually warns lay people not to engage the devil, you know, not to engage evil spirits, because he says that the evil spirits can turn on them and wreak vengeance on them. So I was immediately puzzled as to why there seems to be a contradiction between handing, you know, the laity, a book of deliverance prayers, which is basically, well, I can't help but think that there's some manner, shape, or form of engaging some diabolical powers on the one hand, and on the other hand, actually exercising and kind of stepping on the devil's toes, as it were, and provoking them. Now, maybe the exorcism prayers take more the sense of, you know, appealing to Almighty God and St. Michael the Archangel. Maybe they are not directed to the demon. Maybe they're directed to God, and maybe they're directed to, let's say, St. Michael the Archangel, to the Blessed Mother, St. Joseph. And those prayers, deliverance prayers, they would be asking for deliverance from this perceived besetting power or persecuting power. That would be very different than an exorcism, where the priest, the exorcist, is actually commanding the devil to leave. Okay, so there might be that distinction there. I don't know. You probably are more familiar with the prayers themselves than I am.
A little bit, Father. I haven't read through many of them, but and I did watch some of various interviews with Father Ripperger, and one of the things he talks about a lot is this chain of authority that exists, where he says that parents have certain authority and rights over their children, even over their spouse. And so he says if they perceive there's some kind of demonic influence over, say, a child or a spouse, that a parent or the other spouse has a certain right over that individual, and so that they can actually command that demon to leave, that demonic presence influence to leave their child alone, because this parent has a certain right over that. And he applies that to the spouse as well. He says that spouses, as such, have certain rights over the bodies of their spouse, and so if there's this demonic influence there, the other party can command this demonic spirit to leave because he has rights over, say, a man, say, over his wife. What do you think about that idea, Father? Is there any truth?
Well, the devil wouldn't be the devil if he respected rights. If he respected rights, he would not have done what he did in the first place. So I can't imagine the devil being impressed by that. Whether that gives, let's say, a parent a certain moral authority in the sense of to command a devil to leave a child alone. Perhaps Father Ripperger is referring to that. I don't know. I think the classical Catholic training is that the devil knows who has authority over him. And that authority must ultimately come from God, of course. It comes through the ordination conferred by the Church. Again, I mean, it does puzzle me. See, back in 1972, this is after Vatican II, Paul VI basically revised the minor and the major orders. Up until then, the minor orders, the gateway to the order, receiving the minor orders, was tonsure, okay, which made a man a cleric, member of the clergy. And then he would be ordained porter, and he would be ordained lector, and then exorcist, and then acolyte. And those are the four traditional minor orders, okay? Notice exorcist was the third of the minor orders at the time. Then the major orders, the subdiaconate, diaconate, and the priesthood, right? And in 1972, Paul VI did away with porter, and he did away with exorcist. He did away with them. He simply annihilated them. They didn't exist anymore in the new order. He did away with the subdiaconate, too. He just suppressed it entirely. Then, as far as the major order go, the major order of deacon, for example, he opened it to laity and married men. So, yes, they do have a married clergy in the Novus Ordo, but the order of exorcist was basically simply suppressed in 1972. They didn't ordain anybody. This is part of the problem when Father Ripperger says nobody's being taught these things. Well, he's simply echoing the words of Father Amorth in his book, An Exorcist Tells His Story. Father Amorth wrote this 20 years ago, that the clergy, the modern church, were not being trained in this, and that's why there was such an upsurge of the diabolical, demonic influence in the world. So Father Ripperger is basically saying this is continuing. This is a continuing process here. But if they don't ordain them as exorcists, and heaven only knows if they kept the order of exorcist and revised it, what would that even mean? Because we look at the new rite for ordaining deacons and priests and so on. Those new rites are very suspect. So what would they have done with the order of exorcist? In the traditional rite of ordaining an exorcist, there's no doubt what power is being given. And there's no doubt that the devil knew who had power over him. That power would come from that, the church's ordination of that man as an exorcist to do precisely that work on behalf of Christ, on behalf of his church. In terms of, somebody having a familiar relationship, well, I'm your parent, so I have a right to tell the devil to leave you alone. I don't see how that works. On a natural level, if you're talking about parental rights that are natural rights from God, that would apply to pagans or Jews or atheists or anyone, right? That they would have some kind of power to command the devil. I don't see that. But I understand that Father Ripperger even said that did not apply to godparents and godchildren. You think, well, there's a spiritual relationship between godparents and godchildren. The parents have given responsibility, and that responsibility has been freely accepted by godparents who are blessed by the church. And this is something of a supernatural relationship. So I don't understand why that wouldn't work. So there are a number of things. There are just questions I would have. Father Ripperger might have answers, and good answers. I don't know. But I definitely think there are questions that arise from this that are worthy to ask.
Father, does it seem problematic that Father Ripperger apparently seems to agree with what you're saying, what Father Amorth said, that I think he might even say exactly that, something to the effect that no seminary in the entire world today teaches about exorcism and anything like that. And so, but it seems that his solution to this is to, in some way, empower the laity and give them the tools of exorcism. Is that?
Whom he warns against at the same time engaging with these evil powers, right? Because they can turn on you and attack you or your family.
Doesn't that seem very problematic?
It does. It does seem problematic. And of course it must be. If you depart from traditional Catholic teaching on these things and you face the reality of what the modernists have done to the church, you're going to be experiencing problems and internal contradictions if you're trying to hold on to the traditional teaching of the church and the modernist practices. They're not going in the same direction. They're not in the same church. They're not in the same faith. So if you're trying to do both at the same time, you're necessarily going to have contradictions all the time.
And Father, doesn't this whole idea kind of lend itself to a non-Catholic understanding of prayer and exorcisms in general? Because some of the comments that we've read on some of his interviews have been from people who have said things like they were praying at an abortion clinic and these witches showed up there on the grounds, and so they prayed the perimeter protection prayer and therefore sealed off the perimeter and kept the witches at bay. And it almost seems like it's this kind of magical...
Well, the perimeter protection prayer, what came to mind is an episode in the life of Aleister Crowley, where they draw the circle, and within the circle they're safe, It seems very peculiar to me. Yeah, I'd find it to be odd.
Yeah.
Certainly. I wonder what historical precedent in the church means tradition. I wonder what traditional precedent there is for such a thing, a perimeter protection prayer in the church. I don't know where that would have come from.
Well, what is the traditional Catholic understanding if someone perceives there's some kind of demonic influence in their lives, or maybe their family, their children, their spouse, something like that? What should they do in the traditional Catholic family?
If they believe there's some demonic influence there? Well, the church would say, of course, pray. We have the various prayers to St. Michael the Archangel, obviously. A parent or anyone should not really attempt an exorcism. Father Morth was saying that his initial job, when people brought to him someone they suspected was suffering diabolical influence, was to try to determine if there was, in fact, a diabolical presence there, notably possession. And he said that in itself was a very arduous task. He said you could only force the devil to reveal himself because you had the authority to do so. If the demon is present there and he doesn't want to reveal himself, then only someone with actual authority over him can command him to do so. And it takes a long time, as Father Moore testifies, to force the demon to actually come out into the open and make himself known. If parents really do believe that there is a diabolical influence involved, the church has given them means of praying. Prayer to St. Michael the Archangel, use of the sacramentals. I think Father Ripperger said the young clergy don't know anything about sacramentals. I think he basically made that point, right? Yeah. So if they don't know it, they weren't raised with it, and they weren't taught it in their modern seminaries. But true Catholic parents know what sacramentals are. They're familiar with the St. Benedict medal. They're familiar with holy water. They're familiar with any number of things. Prayer to St. Michael the Archangel. These are spiritual weapons that they can use in this warfare. But if they really believe there is a diabolical presence there that is more than passing, then they really need to contact the local traditional priest and ask him for advice. Not that all traditional priests are well schooled in these things, of course, but they know what they don't know. And any traditional priest, I think, will know what he doesn't know, and will seek advice where he'll find out. We have the means of actually investigating. But I would certainly caution parents, don't try to engage, and I think Father Ripperger would say this too, don't try to engage a demon because you're not only you're not qualified, you're not trained to do it. There are definite rules to follow. I would recommend that if they really fear an actual diabolical presence, they find a traditional priest who is truly traditional, not just traditionalistic, but is really traditional and follows the church's tradition, completely.